The San Jose Sharks have now lost 10 in a row, but hope is still there. Thomas Bordeleau making his debut for the Sharks. We'll talk about him, his future, and where the Sharks go from here with JD Young of Locked On Sharks on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Right now, my pleasure to welcome back to the show from Locked On Sharks, JD Young. JD, how are you?
Good. We're not talking to Evander Kane today, so it's a small miracle.
We are moving forward. We are beyond Evander Kane, even with the 10-game losing streak that your team is suffering through. But the big story for San Jose right now, other than the losing streak, Thomas Bordeleau making his debut, picking up an assist in the Sunday afternoon game against the Minnesota Wild. How important is he to the future of this franchise?
I think he's going to be a big part of the franchise's future. I mean, they've been very high on him since they drafted him in the second round, part of the fabled 2022 draft class for the Sharks, which had Ozzy Weisblatt, Tristan Robbins. You have Daniel Gushin. All these guys are going to be starting to kind of make their way into the, playing with the Barracuda next year and stuff like that. But Bordeleau going to University of Michigan was part of that really loaded Michigan team. And, of course, they didn't kind of have the ending that they wanted to. But, I mean, you're seeing all these Michigan guys around the league kind of starting to make their impact already right away. But, I mean, with Bordeleau, it's pretty interesting. So, instead of just signing him to his ELC right away, they gave him the old amateur tryout. It's that way he could play with the Barracuda, not eat a year of his ELC. 2 games went by, and they're like, screw that. You need to come play with the Sharks because he was too good for the Barracuda. He had 3 assists in his first game with the Barracuda, and then he looked really, really good in the second game with the Barracuda. And then they were like, sign your ELC and head on over to Minnesota to play with the Sharks in Minnesota. So
how did he look out there today? I mean, what was your first impression?
He looked good. I mean, he's definitely he's gonna have to. There's some things that he's gonna have to learn that he can't get away with, and that he could get away with in college and can't get away with in the pros. But I thought he looked really good overall. He played third line center. He was had Noah Gregor and Rudolph Balcers, who kind of both of those kind of mid-6 type of forwards, and he looked good. Noah Gregor, who was been shooting at 3% for the entire season. He had a goal based on some of Bordeleau's good work. He set up Balcers on the first goal of the game where he kind of beat a guy, won a puck battle behind the net, shot around the rim, and then Balcers kind of did the rest there. But, some things he's going to have to work on, just like those moves that you could do in college and those little deeks and fakes that you could do in college, and learning, you don't have as much time and space as you used to. But, I mean, I thought he looked good, and, he wasn't afraid to, especially because he's a bit smaller guy, he's 5'9", but he wasn't afraid to get in there, fight for the puck, kind of do all that dirty work stuff. So I know Bob Bugner was really happy with the way he performed, and he said that Balcers and Gregor had some of their best games, and that was because of Bordeleau's, just Bordeleau being there. So, he got to play a little bit of power play time, and I think since the season's already lost for the Sharks, you'll probably get to see more and more ice time and more responsibilities for Bordeleau as the season kind of winds down here.
Obviously, the 10-game losing streak, not going to make the playoffs this year after a pretty good start to the season. What are the Sharks looking for in these last couple of weeks of the season?
I think it's how do these young guys play? They started 8 rookies today, and I think it's just kind of getting these guys who are going to be part of, either pieces or part of your next core, trying to get them valuable experience down the run here, where they're playing meaningful games and meaningful minutes and kind of trying to gain some momentum going into the offseason, and what's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Sharks, especially with Doug Wilson stepping down. They're going to be, they're looking for a new general manager. There's questions about if Bob Boughner is going to be back, especially if there's a new general manager in town. So they're trying to kind of put together that highlight package going into next season and kind of stake their claims for why they should be on the Sharks going into next year. And guys like Ryan Merkley, who's kind of had an up and down season, you see the highlights and then, it could be shift to shift, where it's, wow, that's amazing what Ryan Merkley can do. And then you're just, put your face in your hand. Like, what are you doing, dude? Like type of things with him, or, guys like Jasper Weatherby or, Scott Reedy, some of these younger guys who trying to make a claim and a stake to why, they can be potential useful pieces for the Sharks going forward.
Any idea what the Sharks are looking for in their next general manager and what kind of philosophy?
That's going to be the big one. It's going to be interesting if they're trying to look for, they keep saying they want to try to make the playoffs next year and, they want to be playoff contenders next year. So are you going to look for a general manager who can kind of add those pieces around kind of an aging core? You just locked up Thomas Bordeleau for the next 8 years. You still have Logan Couture, Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, all these guys who played really well that, at times this year. Are you going to be able to kind of supplement these guys with your core to try to, make a run at the playoffs next year? Or are they going to bring in a general manager who's finally decides, it's been 15, almost 20 years now of good play, but it might be time for the reset button here. And so I think that's kind of the big question, right? Is what type of general manager they're going to bring in is really going to kind of determine their future. And it seems like, if I had to guess, they're going to try to find someone who kind of fits with the pieces they have. Joe Will, who's the assistant general manager, he's been there forever. Tim Burke, Doug Wilson Jr., both kind of in charge of the scouting and the draft. And those guys have done a really great job with the draft recently. So I think they're going to try to find someone who can kind of fit with the foundation that's there and maybe just bring kind of fresh perspective and some new eyes to the team.
Any chance they hire from within?
There is. Joe Will is part of the interviewing process, and I would assume either him or Tim Burke would probably be the two names that would kind of stand out as the next potential. Doug Wilson Jr., who also seems like he might be a potential general manager down the road. He's still too young. He's basically, I think he's 35 or 30, so he's basically our age, and they're not going to, let somebody like that run the team right away. But I still think that they're looking for an outside voice, to try to maybe bring in something like a fresh perspective and somebody new to the team. And, we've had the teal curtain for a long, long time of just kind of quietness. And, I think they're trying to bring somebody new in now.
All right, JD, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find you on social media and where they could find the podcast?
They can find me at my fry hole. Of course, you can find the podcast wherever you get podcasts, as my child decides to fill up his water bottle right this second. You can find us at Locked On Sharks on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube as we march ever closer to the 1,000 subscribers.
Go for it. All right, JD, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Gil.